Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I know there are a number of you who are still getting logged in, but wanted to get started in the interest of time. My name is Jen. I am a part of the MIT Sloan admissions team. I'm also joined by several of my colleagues today who are going to be helping behind the scenes with the Q&A. In the chat, you'll see we just made a little welcome comment and asked that you post all of your questions in the Q&A function. We'll do our best to answer questions behind the scenes. And then as soon as I go through some slides, we'll answer live questions as well. But just for the sake of quick intros, so you can put a face behind all of the names you've all been interacting with. I have Alexis Marcus, who's with me. She's also a part of the evaluation team. Kayon Ellis, Lindsay Cope, and Gael, as well as Stephanie too. So there's a lot of people here to help answer all of your questions. I know the upcoming application deadline has everyone expressing lots of interest about the program. So we're here to address as many questions as we can today. So I'll get started. I think it's important just to take a step and recognize what an MBA is. At the MIT Sloan School, we offer your traditional 2-year full-time MBA program, which falls at the intersection of business and technology. It gives you an opportunity to build leadership skills. We have quite a flexible 2-year program where the first semester is your core curriculum, followed by 3 semesters of electives of your choosing. You also have a required summer internship that gives you a chance to practice those professional skills that you're building. Also, it's a great tool for a lot of the students who are using an MBA to make a pivot in their career. And then, of course, there's lots of support to help you along that career search. So what is the early admissions process? I think probably by now most of you know, but just as a quick refresher, this is a deferred admission program, an ability for current college seniors or students who are in master's programs who haven't had full-time experience yet to apply for an MBA in the future. So if an MBA is in your 5-year plan, then this is a great opportunity for you to secure a seat in a future class. Some of the benefits obviously include no stress while pursuing an application process later on while you're trying to handle a full-time job. Also, it's a great opportunity to kind of create some structure and a roadmap for yourself for the future. The MBA class here is, quite diverse. So this slide represents what the current first-year MBA class profile looks like. So as you can see, the average years of experience is 5 years. Most students coming into the program have between, I'd say, 2 and 7 years of experience, but on average about 4.8 years. We have over 50 countries represented. Certainly students have a strong undergraduate have demonstrated strong undergraduate academic potential with an average GPA of 3.5, some data on test scores, and then a diversity of undergraduate study represented based on the majors here. Equally diverse in terms of countries of citizenship, of ethnicity, male-female split. And then this current class is quite large with 484 students. I'll note that 50 of those students are actually in a joint degree with engineering called the Leaders for Global Operations program. But, because of the pandemic last year, we saw a spike in the class size. We do moving forward, we'll typically see around 430 to 440 students in the class. So the timeline for the MBA early application process is coming up. The application deadline is April 20th. Once you submit your application, we take a few weeks to review all of the applications or read all of the applications that we receive, and then determine who to invite for interviews. So interviews will take place during the month of May. When you apply, you'll get an email confirmation from us with a little more context, maybe fine-tuning that schedule. We wait to see what the application volume looks like before we kind of commit to very specific dates. But for the most part, interviews will take place during the month of May. And then decisions are released on June 8th, and then you'll need to reply to your offer by July 1st. So if you accept our offer, you'll then be put into this kind of cohort of early MBA, pre-MBA candidates, where we have lots of different programming and community building. We'll certainly stay in touch with you during the 2 to 5 years that you're working, and prep you to prepare for the MBA experience. So the whole point of today's webinar is to give you some tips for the application process or the evaluation process. I have a bunch of slides here that kind of go in detail over the application process, as well as how we conduct the assessment process. So every application that comes in is reviewed after the deadline. So you have until that deadline to submit that application. We don't start in advance of the deadline. Applications are reviewed exclusively by our admissions committee, which is comprised of professionally trained individuals. So there's no current students or there's no outside alumni involved in the process, although a couple of alums are on the committee. During the review process, we're scoring on different characteristics or competencies. These are attributes that, we've identified make a strong student at the Sloan School. And they're measured through, things that you're probably, very familiar with, like how well do you work in a team? How do you approach problem solving? How do you communicate or adapt to change? How are you able to advocate something that's different and gain buy-in with your peers or with your team? All of these attributes kind of correlate with the different competencies, like I said, that we find make a successful Sloan student. So many of these attributes are assessed through the written application that you submit, and then we continue to assess those competencies through the interview process. These competencies, they fall into kind of 2 different categories. So the next slide kind of gives a little more detail about that. So in a very MIT-like fashion, we are completely data-driven in this process. So all of the characteristics fall into either what we call demonstrated success or leadership attributes. And then we take a sum of the scores of the competencies in each of those 2 categories, and we plot them on an XY axis here. And you can see, the students who score in those upper right quadrants, are the ones that move forward in the process, get invited to interview. And then the same thing is done again, based on the interview results, we plot those scores. The people in the top right quadrant are the ones that move forward to be admitted. And then in our admissions committee decision meetings, there's a lot of discussion around, students who spike in a certain area, or, ultimately where to draw these lines. Because the applicant pool is a little different each year. And so we want to admit the strongest candidates who apply. All right, so here's a quick overview of the application itself, and then I have some corresponding slides to go over each of these components. The application is rather lean. We ask for a 1-page resume, a 300-word cover letter, 2 letters of recommendation, all of your past and current academic transcripts, a test, and a video statement, which is a 60-second upload of you introducing yourself. To kind of go back to the test, in light of the pandemic over the past year, we have allowed for students to apply without a test just this year. And that is due to a lot of different factors, but ultimately boiled down to the fact that some students don't have access to take a test in a safe environment. And we don't want students to feel that their health needs to be compromised in order to sit for an exam. Therefore, we will, for this year only, allow for candidates to apply without a test, without any negative inference on their application. But if you do have a valid test, we encourage you to submit it, because it is still a tool that we find useful in the process. And so after this deadline, all of the applications are reviewed by the admissions committee. And then, like I said before, interview invitations are sent, and that'll probably happen in early May. So the first component is the cover letter. It's essentially, very similar to a cover letter you would use to apply for a job. Why are you seeking a place in the MIT Sloan MBA program or in a future MIT Sloan MBA class? And what about your past experiences correlates with kind of this statement above? What are you hoping to achieve with the MBA? What are you hoping to do over the next couple of years? It's really a great way for us to kind of get a summary from you of what your past, performances or your past successes are, how that correlates to the type of culture and program that we offer at MIT Sloan. So it gives you a chance to kind of sell yourself to us. And with that, I think it's important to do a little bit of research and correlate that sell to why MIT Sloan's MBA program makes a good match for you. And it's, in your cases, using recent examples is important. I think obviously we're looking at things from the past few years. It's probably not a great idea to go back to examples of high school or before college, unless they were extraordinary. But for the most part, keep it within the last 3 or 4 years, really, because the way we score applicants, the more recent your accomplishments, the more kind of indicative that is of the current characteristics that you display. All right, so the resume is just a one-page resume. We give some guidelines for how to format it. The things that are important to include here, obviously your educational background, any awards or scholarships or, professional accolades that you might have that correlate with that education, your work experiences, particularly professional internships that you've held or research assistant roles, work on campus, anything that's in kind of a professional context would be important to include here. And then with regard to the summary or the details of those work experiences, we're less interested in what your job description is and more interested in kind of the results or the nature of the impact that you were able to create or have on the organizations that you worked with. And then obviously it's always interesting for us to see towards the bottom of your resume, extracurricular activities, community service, maybe additional languages or organizations you're affiliated with, if you've been able to earn any additional certificates or professional skills. Sometimes students have been involved in startups or in organizations that maybe aren't of a professional nature, but are important for us to see that you've been able to demonstrate leadership skills or other corresponding attributes through your involvement in some of these. So it would be important to detail it all out on your resume. Tips, I kind of highlighted a little bit of this already, but quantifiable accomplishments or impact that you've had within the organizations that you worked with. Make it easy to read, standard format. I don't want to have to use, I don't want to have to enlarge it on my screen to read it. I know there are a lot of different, interesting resume templates out there. Just try to keep it simple and easy to read. It's a great way to kind of showcase, like I said before, some of your extracurricular activities or organizations you've been able to demonstrate leadership skills with. And, it's also important to think about how does what you're reflecting in your resume, continue to give us evidence to support your story and your reasoning for pursuing an MBA. So then next is the video statement. So this is an opportunity for you in 60 seconds or less to kind of introduce yourself to your hypothetical future MIT Sloan classmates. It's really designed, again, to be simple, a quick introduction of what your background is, where you're coming from, maybe a little bit more detail around what your interests are or what you plan to do over the next few years. Something that's important to you and why. The idea here is to, have an opportunity to demonstrate your personality, but also, tell us a little bit more about you than we would be able to find by looking at your resume or looking at your kind of LinkedIn profile. Again, keep it simple. Use your best judgment in terms of, how you're dressed or what you look like in the video. It is a professional degree that you're applying to, and the admissions committee will, comment if your presentation isn't in a professional way. And that doesn't mean that you have to be wearing a suit. It just means that, you shouldn't have just kind of rolled out of bed or have a bunch of maybe dirty laundry or whatnot behind you. And then the other tip is make sure we can hear you. So sometimes people stand in a really interesting place, but there tends to be, maybe wind outside or background noise. Just if you're afraid about the noise, just wear a headset like this, make sure that we can hear you. All right, so recommendation letters. We ask for 2 letters of recommendation. One should be from a professional source and one should be from an academic source. So the academic source would be, a faculty member who you've had in class, ideally from wherever you're currently studying, but we'll give you the flexibility to pick that faculty member. We'd love to also see a letter from somebody from a professional source. So ideally someone you worked with or worked for at a professional internship. So a recent or current supervisor would be great. We're really just trying to better understand, how you are able to achieve results in both settings, in both an academic setting and in a professional setting. And you'll see these are the different prompts that we ask recommenders to speak to. I would say choose people who know you well and can kind of give us a little more detail to the questions that we're asking. It's not important to us what the title of the person is. It's more important that they can speak to your abilities. Do not write the letter for them. It's certainly a good idea to, have coffee or have a Zoom chat with them to, explain what your reasoning is for pursuing an MBA, talk about or maybe remind them of some of your more recent accomplishments, but try not to get into a situation where you're sending them text or, writing a portion of the letter for them. That is not good. And, we want this to be an authentic assessment of your abilities from a third party. Their deadline or the letters should all be submitted by the same deadline, which is April 20th. So, maybe there's a little leeway of maybe 12 hours or so, 24 hours, but for the most part, everything should be submitted by that 3 p.m. deadline on April 20th, including all of your letters. Let's see. And then sometimes recommenders have technical difficulties, and we have this email address, which they should receive in the auto communications, but we definitely have people on our team standing by to help support them should they have any trouble using the application recommender process. So test scores, I touched on this before, but test scores are continue to be a component of the application, and they do continue to help us to kind of assess an individual's quantitative academic ability. But like I said before, this is kind of a temporary pause in the requirement for tests. So because of the pandemic, you are able to apply without a test this year. I will say, in addition to that, if you are choosing to submit an application without a test, we're still going to be looking for evidence of your academic success or your academic strength. So of course, we'll be looking at all of the transcripts that you submit. And then if you have taken any additional, maybe non-degree coursework, I know a lot of students have taken online courses or Coursera classes, sometimes have taken like computer science or coding classes. Anything you've done, include it in the non-degree coursework section of the application. And then it's also really important, I think sometimes, especially with this population, you don't share with us what you're currently enrolled in. So even though you don't have grades for your spring semester, we do want to see what you're currently taking. So make sure to include that, either if it's in the transcript that you upload, or you can add it in for additional classes. Different schools manage it differently. All right, so the interview. So the interview is interview invitations, like I said, will go out in early May. If you're invited to interview, you're also invited to share 2 additional short answer questions. And these help us to learn a little bit more about your background. We'll get into that in a second. But the interview itself is about 30 minutes. It's on Zoom with a member of the admissions committee. So if you're meeting with me, I will have read through your application and come prepared to ask questions about the different characteristics, like I talked about before, about problem solving, how you work in a team, etc. They're behavioral questions that will really guide you to answer with examples from the past. So they're not questions where you would give a hypothetical or future-based question or future-based answer. It's about how you've handled something in the past, and then how other people who were involved reacted to what the situation was, how you felt, who else was involved, and then what ended up being the result. Very standard behavioral questions, but we will also ask questions about why you're interested in coming to MIT, why an MBA in the future. We will ask questions about what your plans are between now and matriculating. And it's okay if you don't have a job lined up. We certainly don't expect you to, but we would ask questions about what you're pursuing or what your interests are. And so all of that should be things that you're prepared to discuss in the interview. The essays or the short answer questions, really, they're 250 words or less. So one is about a time that you were able to contribute toward making a work environment or school environment more welcoming, inclusive, and diverse. And then the second question is related to data. So we're really looking to better understand how you use data to make decisions about things, and then how you communicate results. So you're able to select one or the other prompts here. One is you can use an existing data visualization. It might be something you've seen in the news or on a website, and an analysis of COVID cases at your school or whatever the case might be. And then comment on your analysis of that data visualization, or you can use something that you've created yourself for maybe a project at work, a project at school, or a previous internship or work experience. So here we're really looking for evidence of your ability to work in a diverse environment and to collaborate with people who think about things in a different way. We are also interested in really how you analyze data and how you communicate the results of that. So it's important to be prepared to give an overview of whatever the analysis was that you included in your interview. And so just some other additional tips, simple things, follow the directions, try to be yourself, especially in the video and the interview. It's not about trying to be something you're not. It's about being genuine and, communicating your strengths. Don't try to stand out. It's really about, presenting your best self. And then finally, think of myself and everyone else on our admissions team as your advocate. And this is an application process for me to gather the information I need to help, advocate for you in those decision meetings, or to help score your application to get you invited to an interview. There's a number of different people who are involved in the decision-making process, and, your application and your interview are the best tool for you to give us the evidence that we need to admit you. All right, so now I want to get to Q&A. I know there's lots of Q&A coming in.
Lots of questions coming in, Jen.
Okay.
We've answered some on the side, but I think one that I keep seeing coming up, could you just talk about eligibility for the MBA Early program a little bit more? I think that some people might be a little bit confused on whether or not they should be applying to this program or directly to the MBA. So, what's best for folks?
Yep. So the eligibility requirement is that you have not had any full-time work experience. So I think the window is you should have graduated, sometime during the course of late 2020 through July or so of 2021. I know graduation dates, especially over the past year because of the pandemic, have been a little bit fluid. So I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's maybe August or September of 2020 through July-ish of 2021. If you're able to, if you've started to work, that's okay. As long as your graduation date was within that window, you can apply for the deferred admission. Otherwise, you should probably be applying to the traditional MBA program if you've been out working for more than 6 months or so.
Okay, great. And so I know there are a lot of people that are looking to graduate in 2022. So you folks should probably be applying next April,
Exactly.
But it's not too early to be getting this information. But kind of along those same lines, lots of questions on the test scores as they relate to future years. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So if you're planning to apply in a future year, it is it's still undecided, but highly likely the test will be reinstated. The test requirement will be reinstated. So, this was not ever intended to be a permanent decision. It's really a temporary decision based on limiting factors to students being able to access exams. I will say we are happy to accept the online version of GMAT or GRE. So, do not feel pressure to take the test in person. But if you're planning for the future, it would be smart to take the test.
Awesome. Another popular question seems to be about letters of recommendation. I know, we do indicate that one should be coming from a professional source, from an internship, and one should be coming from an academic source. Some people are saying that, they didn't really get to, interact with their internship supervisor because of the pandemic, and they were, remote. And then others are saying, maybe it's better if I have 2 internships. So is it okay if they do 2 academic or 2 professional?
It's okay. There's always an exception to the rule. I'll say that, but it's ideal if you have had professional experiences that we hear from someone who can speak to your ability to succeed in a professional environment, as well as I'd say it's required for us to see at least one academic letter.
Okay, awesome. Some people have questions about the cover letter. They're, worried about being able to fit it all into 300 words, and maybe even differentiate between the cover letter and the video statement. I know I've responded to a couple people saying, make sure you're reading those prompts because the video is really an intro to your classmates. Excuse me, I have a little friend in the background here. But maybe you could talk a little bit about the cover letter.
Yep. So the cover letter and the video are your chance to kind of shine here. And it's great if they can both talk about, a little bit of different things. So, there obviously should be some connection in terms of your introduction in the video, but it's an opportunity to share more with us. So the cover letter, you can do it. I promise you can do it. 300 words is a lot. It doesn't have to be, super detailed. It can be bullets. It can be, a quick summary of your past successes, and then, why you're intending to pursue an MBA in the future and why from MIT Sloan. I think the video gives you a little bit more time to elaborate and to talk about things that you can't maybe fit in the cover letter.
Okay, great. What are the best ways for folks to spend the 2 to 5 years?
The best way to spend the time is, for us, it would be required that you work full time. And so that would be, typically, you're welcome to download. We have over 10 years of employment results and class profile data on our website. But, if you look at the common path that people are coming from into the MBA, we would assume that you're doing a lot of those similar things, working in tech and consulting and finance. If you're a part of a startup, that's great. You'll need to make sure, if you're planning to come at just the 2-year mark, that you can really demonstrate to us that you've been, fully employed for those 2 years. So that is sort of the condition of your admission to this program, that you are working full time for 2 years, beginning immediately after you graduate.
Okay, great. For people that are concerned maybe about their GPA or not submitting a test score, how can they, show their strengths in other ways on the application?
Yep. So if you don't have a test, we always look at the detail of the academics that you submit. So all of the courses that you've taken, any extracurricular activities, any professional experiences you have that maybe have been able to help you to build out your quantitative analysis or data analysis skills. Any additional, like I said, non-degree courses that you've taken, all of that is relevant. So anything, especially that can help convey your ability to succeed in a quantitative environment, is important for us to see.
Okay, great. I'm just reading through some questions. A lot of them are the same, and we just kind of talked about a lot of them. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the relevant coursework and additional coursework session. I know you gave some examples in the slide. What's helpful for the admissions committee to see in that section? And is there anything that people should be taking in order to fill that section up?
Yep. So we don't really have any prerequisites, so to speak, but some classes that have been known to help students, especially in the core curriculum, are statistics, financial accounting, microeconomics. And then, again, like anything that can help you to build your quantitative skills. In the relevant coursework section, there's lots of different, categories of courses listed there, but and certainly, open an application and read through that. That can give you some insight into the different areas that we're looking at. But, I'd say, anything related to kind of a business discipline or analytics or engineering, any kind of quantitative assessment of your abilities through coursework is a great way to continue to convey to us your academic ability.
I have a question, Jen. Actually, switching gears, folks are asking about those soft skills and leadership and how they can demonstrate that maybe outside of a working experience. Can you talk about how we view that in the application?
Yep. So we'd love to see, evidence of your ability to kind of lead groups and take initiative to do things. Oftentimes we see that through your involvement in student organizations on campus, through conferences, competitions, hackathons, whatever the case might be in your, in your academic community or your campus community. But any type of leadership role you've taken on within student organizations should definitely be detailed for us. I think there's a couple of specific questions about that in the application and then also on the resume.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about the interview and kind of how you get to that point. People are wondering, are we going to find out all at once? Is it going to be a rolling? And when will they know?
Yep, all good questions. This is I guess this year I would I'd like to have everybody find out at the same time, but depending on application volume, it might be 2 different dates. So that's why I was kind of vague in the early May deadline. We've seen sort of a growth in application volume this year across our MBA programs, and indicators point similarly to this program. So we want to make sure we give ourselves enough time and to thoroughly review all of the applicants that come in. So, and then also enough time to interview people. So you may find out all at the same day. You may find out on 2 different dates. Once you submit the application, we will communicate with you what the plan is. The day after everybody submits the application, we send kind of a confirmation email letting you know everything has been received and this is the plan moving forward. So we try to be as transparent as possible. I'm just hedging a little bit based on making sure that we have enough time to cover the application volume.
Great. I saw some questions about LGO. So maybe you could explain a little bit what LGO is and then tell folks that do know what it is, how they can be considered for that at the time that they matriculate.
Yep, LGO is an awesome program at MIT. It gives you the chance to earn an MBA and a Master of Engineering in one of 6 or 7 different disciplines. Unfortunately, LGO is not able to admit people to on a deferred basis, but it is, there is sort of a streamlined path for you. Should you be admitted to the MBA early program, when it comes time for you to matriculate, we'll help you to submit kind of an expedited application to the LGO committee for consideration. So it's actually a 24-month program. It starts in June instead of in September. And then it has a 6-month internship component with a partner company of LGO. So you can check out the LGO website. There's lots of detail there about their partners, but they're large scale operations, manufacturing and tech companies. The one prerequisite for LGO is that you have to have an engineering undergraduate degree or a STEM undergraduate degree. Some disciplines besides engineering apply or are eligible. And then in that, streamlined application, the year you're ready to matriculate, you would have to create, a case for which discipline of engineering you'd like to pursue, whether it be, mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, computer science, et cetera. So, you would we would put you in touch with someone from the LGO team. They'll do a webinar and help prep you. And then it's a great opportunity to join MIT and earn 2 degrees.
Great. So as part of the MBA early application, we ask about your future plans after graduation. If you don't have that kind of solidified yet, you don't have a job offer, or you haven't accepted a job offer yet, what's the best way to approach that question?
Yeah, tell us the honest answer. I mean, nothing will be held against you. We don't expect everybody to have jobs lined up, especially in this crazy COVID year. We know the job market is quite challenging right now. So in the interview, you could talk about what your plans are. In the application, it asks you if you know what your plans are. You could include it there. I think there's a short answer text box below that. If you're not sure what the official job is, you could just, make note of that. Maybe you received an offer, but not sure if you'll accept it. Try to give us as much information as you want to share, as long as it's, truthful and accurate in terms of what you think you might be doing.
Great. I just want to clarify for a lot of folks asking questions. This is about MBA Early, which is our deferred admissions program. So we're not going to be talking about our EMBA or Sloan Fellows program during this particular webinar, but you're welcome to reach out to our office at any point about those questions. Jen, maybe you could just talk a little bit more about the video. I know I see some questions coming in. People just get nervous about the video, even though it tends to be our favorite component. People are nervous. Could you just talk about, what, I know you talked about the professionalism in it, but what should they be saying?
Yeah, so the video is a way for you to kind of introduce yourself to your future friends. So, think of it as if you were going to like a networking event at school or an alumni networking event or, a Zoom chat to, learn about what it means to work at, I don't know, Google or Amazon or whatever the case might be. How would you introduce yourself to someone you were trying to impress? You would likely share a little bit about where you went to school or where you've had internships, maybe where you're originally from, and then a little bit more about, you as as it relates to your personality or your interests, your hobbies, etc. So, it's a chance for us to kind of scratch the surface a little bit and learn a little bit more about what makes you you. And then it's good if you can, like I said, kind of use that as an add-on to the cover letter and the resume component of the application. It's a great tool for us to learn a little bit more beyond what we see in other aspects of your application.
Great.
1 second, Alexis.
Oh, yeah.
I have a question about the quantitative skills that keeps being a theme. And I have a few humanities majors that are worried. Can you talk about how they can stand on the application and whether Sloan is a great fit for them?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the way I was answering the question was in relation to people who were submitting an application without a test. So if we are looking for evidence of academic horsepower, particularly as it relates to quantitative topics or quantitative subjects. So, a test is a great tool for us to assess that regardless of what you've studied. If you are a humanities major and you have no quantitative background, we'd be looking for additional things that you've done in order to convey to us that you'll succeed in our classroom. And we admit lots of people from a humanities background. It's not that there's a requirement for you to have all of these classes. It's just in the application process, we're trying to, assess your ability to do well in a classroom at MIT that is definitely going to be, full of problem sets and quantitative, will require you to have aptitude to succeed in a quantitative environment. So humanities majors, we'd be looking at, like, if you've taken an economics class, if you've taken any math classes, if you have any, maybe additional certifications or evidence of being able to learn any programming languages, particularly Python or R. We'll put a lot of weight in the interview on that question about how you analyze data and communicate results. And then kind of looking at sort of what your internships have been. So it's totally fine if you are, we'll say an English major, but if you've had internships in industries that are relevant to where we see MBAs typically coming from, then that definitely helps too. That proves that you've been able to succeed in a professional quantitative environment.
Great. Maybe you could talk a little bit about anyone that's admitted to our MBA Early program. How do they stay connected with us between the time that they're admitted and they ultimately matriculate 2 to 5 years down the road?
Yep. So we have a number of different ways that we try to stay engaged with you, and we try to help you to build kind of a community among one another. Kayon, who's spoken up a couple times, helps to kind of lead this, what we call sort of pre-MBA conversion process. So helping you to stay connected. We have a couple different groups within different regions of the world or of the globe. And, hopefully when we kind of come out of this pandemic, we'll be able to hold some more in-person events, happy hours and such. Right now, there's lots of kind of online ways to engage with one another and virtual events. And then in addition to that, you'll, be on sort of a special communication plan with us, helping to keep you informed of all of the latest and greatest things happening at Sloan, and how it relates to timing for you and the matriculation process. And then in the year that you're ready to join us, we have you fill out sort of what we call an update application. It's really just a chance for us to get your updated professional skills, updated resume, updated contact information. And then you have a quick kind of check-in phone call with us, making sure that you're eligible to matriculate at that point. It's really just we make sure that you've kind of fulfilled this sort of conditional component of your offer, meaning that you've worked for at least 2 years prior to coming in.
For admits that are getting admitted to the MBA Early program, when do they get considered for fellowship or any financial aid?
Yep, great question. A fellowship is awarded in the year that you matriculate, so not at the time of admission. It's just too complicated for us to commit funds in indefinite years in the future. So when you fill out that update application and secure your seat for that class in the year you're ready to matriculate, that process happens in the early fall, usually September timeline. And then you would be sort of admitted or, readmitted into the graduating class in, mid-December. And at that time, in mid-December, you'll find out about fellowship and financial aid, which would be the same timing the rest of the first round students get admitted to the MBA program. So, typically that timeline is mid-December. Occasionally application dates and deadlines are modified. So, again, hedge that a little bit, but for the most part, it's usually the middle of December you would find out.
Another good one that just came in, is this a binding, if they get admitted, is it a binding decision if they put down a seat deposit? How does that all work?
It is not binding. There's a deposit, and so you would lose your deposit, but it is not a binding. It is not a binding decision.
Great. Okay. Let's see. We have some people that are concerned about their grades. They might have had low grades some semesters. What's the best way for them to address that?
Yeah, in the application, there's a spot you could use to address if there's a reason behind a bad semester or, whatever the situation might be. You could definitely address that in the application. Otherwise, we're looking for kind of an upward trend when we look at your grades. It's okay if freshman year you had a rough time acclimating, or if there's a specific semester that had a reason behind it. Completely understandable. I mean, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, we don't expect, perfection, but, we do look at, individual classes and then your overall cumulative GPA and sort of any trends that we see as we look at the different transcripts.
Talking about different transcripts, Jen, a few of our international students are worried we won't be able to understand their school system at all. Will we be able to manage that on our side?
Of course. So, I've had the pleasure of being at MIT on the admissions team for the past 19 years. I have been able to do lots of research on different international transcripts, and I am one of over 20 people on our team who, have lots of expertise when it comes to this. And then we also always have many different faculty members who represent, lots of different degree programs, lots of different universities from all over the world. And I can always reach out to them if there's something that I don't understand. All that with the caveat that we do require an English translation of your transcript if it's in a different language. But we, have become experts at lots of different, the academic systems in lots of different countries.
Great. Seems like we're answering a lot of these questions. I think maybe there was some clarification needed on the comment about seats. So seat deposits, and whether or not that would need to happen every year that they're in between when they deposit and when they matriculate.
Yeah, good question. No. So at the time of admission, so if you're applying right now, you would find out June 8th. You would then need to pay a deposit. I think it's $700 or $750. You deposit by July 1st. And then we hold that. And then the year that you're planning to matriculate, you would then pay a second deposit. All of the funds go towards your future tuition, but it's just a tiered deposit process, but it is not required every year. Great.
I'm going to invite any of my colleagues that are seeing additional questions. I'm trying to kind of go through them, but I'm not seeing any that haven't been answered.
I agree. I'm reading through a bunch too. So maybe like last call for questions that are different than we haven't answered already. Otherwise we can kind of wrap up.
Yeah. Maybe we could just quickly talk about, people are asking about reapplicants. So I'm not sure that being a reapplicant to the MBA early program necessarily makes sense. So maybe we could just clarify that point one last time.
So maybe reapplicants, if you apply to the early program, you're not admitted, but then apply later to the future traditional MBA program. And we encourage that, and we expect to see a lot of that. The early MBA program is not seating as many students, as the traditional MBA process. Ideally, we're looking for this program to seat, maybe like 10 to 15 to maybe 20% of the MBA class in the future. But we're only in the early years of this program. We're only now seeing students matriculate. So, we do expect many students to go on to apply. If they're not successful, you have a very encouraging letter you received to reapply in the future. And so it is certainly encouraged, and we will look positively upon candidates who reapply.
Great, thank you. Any other questions, Can? I just saw you come off mute. Do you find any others?
I had one question. I get this quite often. Folks are asking how they can show their enthusiasm for why MIT and why this MBA. Where is the best place to put that in their application, if anywhere?
Yeah, like I said, mentioned before, both in your cover letter and mentioning it in your video is great. I think show us that you've done some research, that you understand what sort of differentiates and what makes the MBA program at MIT Sloan a good match for your personal motivations for pursuing this degree.
Great. Lindsay, are there any other questions? I see a lot of questions about the recording. Maybe you can talk about that.
Sure thing. Thanks everyone for attending today's session. We will be posting a recording of this session to our YouTube page and sharing an email with the link as well. So you will definitely be able to revisit this. Jen, I see a couple questions related to applying without a GMAT or GRE score. Does opting to take the test show any sort of additional dedication? Does the admissions committee sort of see that as a bonus? And then question 2, does not having a test negatively impact future scholarship opportunities?
So not having a test will not negatively impact you in any capacity, so absolutely not. Future scholarship or fellowship would not be hurt by you taking advantage of this one-time ability to apply. We are very committed to making sure that everyone gets equal assessment with or without the exam. I think having the exam is a good tool for us to assess your candidacy, but if you choose to apply without it, then there's no negative inference in your application. Any other questions?
I think I'm not seeing too many that we haven't already addressed.
Okay. Well, I think we can wrap things up then. We have this email address dedicated to the early MBA process. And then, if you have questions related to the application itself, there's also contact information within the application you can reach out to for support. We are excited to get to know all of you throughout this application process. It's a privilege for us to learn about your backgrounds, and we love hearing your stories, watching your videos, reading your letters. We're excited and looking forward to April 20th when we can get to know you all better. So please, reach out if you have questions. Thank you so much to all of my colleagues who helped put this together today and answer all of your questions behind the scenes. And we'll look forward to those applications coming in on the 20th. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.